The Denver Broncos were back at practice preparing for one of the biggest games of the season, maybe one of the biggest games that they have had in Denver in a decade. We got Broncos, Packers on deck for Sunday, and the Broncos held their first practice of the week today, and I've got everything that you need to know from practice and after practice. Before I dive into it, make sure to hit us with the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel for all of your Broncos news straight from Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. And the good news of the day is the Broncos had many players back out at practice. DJ Jones, who missed last week and did not play in the game, he was back, and he wasn't just back, he was a full participant in practice. I fully expect him to be back for the Packers game, and that's going to be huge because of Josh Jacobs and their running attack. More on the Packers later and how the Broncos are preparing for that later in this, so stay tuned for that. Nate Adkins also practiced, and then the Broncos did not have Pat Bryant at practice today. He was dealing with the hamstring last week, but he did play in the game today. He did not practice out there. We'll see how he progresses through the rest of the week, but Pat Bryant's kind of evolved into the Broncos' #2 receiver, so that is a big deal to not have him. So stay tuned throughout the week for more information on if Pat is back or not. And then another guy that was back at practice today that has not been on the practice field for a very long time for the Broncos, Ben Powers, the Broncos starting guard, who now Alex Palchevsky is filling in for. Ben Powers was designated to return off the injured reserve. So what this means, it does not necessarily mean he is playing in this coming game on Sunday. And in fact, I would not expect him to play in this. But the Broncos now have 21 days to make a decision on whether Ben Powers is activated off the injured reserve or if he's on injured reserve for the rest of the season. I fully expect him to be back off of injured reserve at some point, probably not this week, but potentially next week. The Broncos have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. This would only be a boost to it. So the Broncos get a boost on their offensive line in the coming weeks for their playoff run. Speaking of Pat Bryant, just talked about him. Bo Nix went out of his way to praise Pat Bryant and RJ Harvey, saying that both rookies aren't playing like rookies, and they're playing bigger than rookies, and boy, that's what the Broncos are going to need from both of these guys down the stretch. Like I said, Pat Bryant has really evolved into the Broncos' #2 receiver, and he only continues to get more reps as he goes along. Bo Nix said he just plays smarter than a rookie, and he really understands where this Broncos offense is, and that's not usual for a rookie. And then RJ Harvey, he is a guy that the Broncos are really going to rely on, and we saw it just this past week against the Raiders. RJ Harvey had his breakout game, going for 100 yards from scrimmage, 75 on the ground, 25 through the air, added a touchdown there, really showed good vision as a running back, and that's one thing that Sean Payton preaches. We saw him be kind of the joker role, a receiver out of the backfield when J.K. Dobbins was healthy. Now we're seeing RJ Harvey develop as a runner, and Sean said that is what stood out about him in the draft process, was his running abilities, not receiving abilities. So they are super confident that he is going to be that runner. And Bo Nix is right. They are both playing bigger than rookies, and the Broncos are going to need them to continue to play like veterans down the stretch for the Broncos to have a deep playoff run. On the opposite side, Pat Surtain talked today about how the Broncos have to capitalize on the potential turnovers that they get. We've seen the Broncos drop many interceptions, and Pat said that has to stop. We have to get interceptions now. And the crazy thing about the Broncos defense, leading the league in sacks on a historic pace to break the all-time record for sacks, you would think that would mean turnovers are coming in bunches. And crazy enough, it's not. That's like the one department that the Broncos defense actually isn't top 10 in, isn't top 5 in. They're not taking the ball away, and that is something that probably needs to change for a deep playoff run, and Pat Surtain specifically knows that the interceptions need to come, and I expect at some point those to come, whether it's the interceptions, whether it's strip sack fumbles because of Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper and Zach Allen and DJ Jones and John Franklin-Meyer getting after the pass rush, or Brandon Jones and Hufanga. Hufanga's had a couple that have hit his hands and he's just not been able to bring in. So that's an emphasis for the Broncos down the stretch in these final 4 games, is getting more interceptions. And speaking of the game this week, Broncos have 4 big games to finish the season. They play 3 games against winning teams, only 1 team with a losing record, and that's the 6-7 Kansas City Chiefs. But this week, it is the Green Bay Packers, and it's interesting, the different dynamics that we're hearing inside the locker room of how the Broncos are treating this. Some people, not inside the locker room, but some people from an outside, think this might be a Super Bowl preview. The Broncos and Packers. They've only played in the playoffs once. We know how Super Bowl 32 went for the Broncos. It was John Elway winning a trophy there. But people think that this might be a Super Bowl preview for this year. And inside the building, some guys are saying, yeah, this is going to be a playoff-like atmosphere. It's going to be that big of a game, and we hope to have that crowd and atmosphere like it's a playoff game. And then others, like Pat Surtain said, I'm just keeping it as a game. Not trying to blow it too much out of proportion, but understanding how good the Packers are. Sean Payton, though, went out of his way to hype up the crowd. So Broncos country, if you are going to be at the game, Sean Payton wants this to be the biggest crowd and loudest crowd and best crowd environment that the Broncos have had, specifically when Jordan Love is in the huddle, not when he's at the line of scrimmage. When Jordan Love gets to the huddle is when he wants the crowd to be so loud, because that actually impacts the game and helps the defense and hurts Jordan Love and hurts the offense communication. Of course, when the Broncos are on the field, you can be quiet, save your voice when Jordan Love is back on the field. Sean Payton expects this to be a playoff-type crowd, so bring the energy on Sunday. That would be Sean's message to you. And then speaking of the game this week, the Broncos have the best record in the NFL, 11-2. They have the longest win streak in the NFL, 10 straight wins, and they also have the longest home win streak in the NFL, yet they're underdogs? That's right. The Broncos are underdogs, 2.5-point dogs to the Green Bay Packers, which is just crazy to think about because the Broncos have the best record, yet they're underdogs. Bo Nix was asked about that, and he said that he doesn't really pay attention to that, and that the quote of the day, maybe even the quote of the season, said, "My mom thinks we're going to win, so that's all that matters." So Bo Nix's mom, Mrs. Nix, thinks the Broncos are going to win this game, and that's what Bo's riding with. I'm sure other moms in the locker room also believe the Broncos are going to win this week. 2 more things really quick. We got Micah Parsons coming to town in the Green Bay Packers, and pretty much there's 3 key pieces that people are pointing to when it comes to this Green Bay Packers team. Jordan Love, obviously, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's having a very good year. Josh Jacobs, he's over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, which is very, very impressive. And then Micah Parsons on the defensive side of the ball. Sean Payton was asked, what do you think of that Micah Parsons trade? And Sean really blew it off. He said, those are 2 NFC teams, didn't really think about it. Now I'm thinking about Micah Parsons and the player he is for the Packers this year. And the key with Micah Parsons, one thing that I asked Sean after practice today, and he said is a key. You have to understand where Micah Parsons, number 1, is at every play, because he is not like a Nick Bonito where he just lines up on the edge. Micah Parsons lines up everywhere as a linebacker, as an edge rusher, in the middle. So the Broncos are going to pay attention to exactly where he is on every single play, and they cannot let him ruin the game. Here's a crazy fun fact, though, just about how good Nick Bonito is. Micah Parsons has 12.5 sacks. Nick Bonito has 12.5 sacks. Micah Parsons has 12 tackles for a loss. Nick Bonito has 12 tackles for a loss. Micah Parsons just signed a deal for $46.5 million per year. Nick Bonito just signed a deal for nearly half of that. $26.5 million per year is what Nick's making. Nick is an incredible pass rusher and maybe the best value in the NFL compared to that Micah Parsons deal. And final thing, congratulations to Marvin Mims, who brought home AFC Special Teams Player of the Week this morning. He talked in his locker about it and said, this was crazy enough, the first punt return touchdown that he's had. He's been an all-pro returner in the first 2 years of his career, yet this was the first punt return he's had, and man, you can tell that he's thrilled to get that off his back. So congratulations to Marvin for winning winning AFC Special Teams Player of the Year. So much more to come. We're going to be following the injuries throughout the week, see if Pat Bryant's back. Make sure to like, subscribe to this channel to get the most up-to-date Broncos news there is right here.